because we didn't expect the film to be embraced, because we didn't expect anyone to give us help, we had nothing but freedom. And I think you had mentioned before, when people are thinking about how do I get into this, or sometimes the question becomes, oh, what is working, or what does the market want? Or you start to adjust your creativity to fill a certain space. But I really think, like I said, Gazer down the line, there's nothing about the film that anyone would kind of sign on to make. They're a 70s style paranoia thriller with no stars. Yeah. You know, that is somewhat a character study in the beginning that turns, it just, no one was asking for that. There was no space in the market for that. But I think the special thing is Ryan and I from the beginning were only concerned about making the film we wanted to see, that we were desperate to see.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Ariella Mastroianni is an actor. She co-wrote, co-produced, and stars in the new movie Gazer. She sat down with me on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
Gazer is an example of you developing this character from scratch, but let's put that aside for a second. I want to know your process when you don't get to develop the character, when a character is either presented to you as a potential thing for you to do or an audition that you book. And suddenly you face the idea that I have to figure out how to play this person now. And so what are your first steps toward kind of wrapping your arms around this person that you have to play?
I think it's always different. It depends on the character, it depends on the piece, it depends on the team, and it depends on the way I react to what's on the page. So I don't really have one sort of method that I apply. There's the initial reaction. And then from there, I think I just play and I throw things kind of at the wall, whether it's physicality, whether it's a voice. Sometimes I find it's really helpful. Something that always grounds me is finding like a real life, a real person to connect it to. So for example, with Kyle and with Kyle Donnelly and Brad Fleischer, who I train with, we were working on, what were we working on? I was working on Uncle Vanya. And there was one class where Kyle had brought in photographs of real people in Russia, in that area at the time. And there was something about seeing a photograph of a real person in that environment. I think that always kind of locks it into place, where I think like, oh, I'm doing this for them. Like if they were here in the audience, I would want them to see them present on the stage. And there's something like about finding a real person to do it for that always locks it in for me.
And what do you think that is? Is that some kind of like, because I just suddenly related to that, but I'll tell you what that said to me. It's like an imposed kind of pressure to please them. Is that what it is?
I don't even think it's that. I think we're in this business of make-believe in a way. We are reflecting life. But, there are so many, we play, and you're supposed to play. And it's never meant to be done one way. So what you have is like a bunch of options, which is fun. But I think it's not so much a pressure to please. It's as if they're sitting there, something about their presence, or like imagining their presence, just kind of grounds me. Where it's like it's instantly becomes not about you. And it only becomes about them.
Interesting. Yeah.
And it always just takes me out of. There's like the the rehearsal process, there's moments of play and moments of building and exploration and fun. And then there's not worrying about yourself at all and what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I always just place someone there, because I think for me, the absolute kind of, the best compliment you could receive is not, she did a great performance. To me, the best compliment is, oh my God, that she reminded me so much of my aunt.
Yes.
So I love to
Yes.
think of who is the aunt that's there.
Yes, that's so cool. And that really is important, right? I mean, if somebody comes up to you and says, that was a great performance, you really should be thinking, oh, this could have been better then.
Yes, because then they're watching the performance.
Yeah.
It should never be about the performance. When everyone is working in tandem,
Yeah.
the people leaving the theater or leaving the cinema should be so wrapped up in that world that they're leaving with the expression of the world. They're not talking about the cinematography or the direction or the art or the colors or the performances. You want to sweep them away so it lingers with them.
Yes.
And they're not thinking about anything else but the world and what
Yes.
they've experienced.
Yes.
I think that's the highest compliment.
I know, that's so true. Well, you mentioned two very important teachers, Brad Fleischer and Kyle Donnelly.
Yes. And included in that, I also want to mention Anthony Abeson as well, who's a New York teacher who I've trained with.
Did you study somewhere else first before you met these incredible teachers? Did it take time to realize what teachers were going to work best for you and what road you wanted to take down in terms of studying?
So I was born and raised in Canada, Whitby, Ontario. There is not much in Whitby, Ontario. But I've always wanted to act and write. I've always been very drawn to the arts. And I think the absence of the arts where I was really drove that hunger. So I, ever since I was young, my school, for example, they didn't have any sort of arts programs. And I would bother them all the time to either choreograph dances, to perform at the assemblies. I would write plays and ask them if we could, get the school together so I could put them on. There was absolutely nothing. So when I moved from Canada to the States, suddenly I was near New York, which was like Disney World. And I did pretty much, I just did as much research as I, could when I was 12, 13. I was always asking people for recommendations for training. I would go on Playbill. Teachers would do special one-offs. So I was just always trying to get involved, even from when I was very young. So pretty much I think it was my stepbrother who also was interested in the arts. He knew a woman, her name is Anne Rattray, who did a teacher, actor, one of the most phenomenal women I've ever known. She really, really changed me, not just as an actor, but really, really as a person. But she had a private studio out of her home on the Upper West Side. And I started training with her, and that was like a whole new world for me, because all of the actors in my class, it was a small group of 5 to 10, they were all working, and I had never really been around working actors before. And it was just the level of focus, the level of preparation, the energy. Everyone was so good. I felt very lucky to be in that environment. And that is where I trained for many years before I started to branch out. So I was with Anne for, I think, maybe 10 years, from when I was 14 to, right after college.
Wow.
I studied something different in school, just for variation. I felt like I was almost at that point too intensely focused on acting, where I started to feel less like a person and more just you know.
Yeah.
I wanted to be surrounded by different people. Yeah, I trained with her for many years. And then just through friends, I came across Anthony Abeson. And at the same time, I also came across Brad Fleischer, and I started training with both of them. And they were, at the same time, different, the first two teachers that I trained with outside of Anne. So I had come out of this one method of training that I was used to, and I felt like at that point I needed something else, because I felt my own habits and limitations kind of forming. So it was just through friends, research, and then through Brad, he recommended Kyle.
Yeah.
But that transition was tough.
You mean from Anne to them? Yeah.
Yeah. Because you get used to, you get comfortable.
That's a long time with one person.
Yeah.
And even though you're gaining a lot from that, but it's probably good to just pop yourself into a different pond, right?
100%.
Yeah. And to just see, but you popped yourself in good ponds. It could have been
Very
bad
good
if you
ponds.
didn't.
Yes. Oh no. And that's what I was nervous about.
Yeah.
And the quality of work was so high and so good that I was nervous to branch out. I was nervous that I would have too many voices in my head. I was nervous that I would be too, overtrained in a way.
Yeah.
Which now I think, I actually don't know if that is possible, but it depends on the training. I was just scared to, kind of give myself to someone else. But it is what you do professionally on each set.
Right. In a way, right?
You are trusting your
That's right.
director and the team. And
that's right.
So I felt it was necessary.
Yeah. And were you doing, during this training period, during this time, were you going on auditions, trying to land stuff at the same time?
Yes and no. I always felt that there is so much out of your control. And the one thing that is in your control is how much you love it and how hard you train. I was only ever focused on the process of doing it, because I loved it so much, and figuring it out. I never put too much pressure on the professional aspect while I was training, even though it is a different skill set that I wanted to practice. So I would go on auditions here and there because it's necessary to both train and do.
Yeah.
But again, for the pursuit of just getting better.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. That's long gaming it, isn't it?
I kind of always felt that even if someone were to present like a crystal ball and tell me, under no circumstance would you ever do this professionally, I think I would still train as hard as I did.
That's amazing.
Because I just was so obsessed with kind of the magic of it.
Yeah.
But I do think it is important, if you are pursuing it professionally, to be out there and auditioning, because I don't know,
you kind of keep your feet wet in that. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
It's a different skill set.
Yeah.
You could end up becoming too comfortable in a class.
Yeah. It is almost like a safety place, isn't it? Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. You could find that. So I was always aware. I did want to pursue it professionally. I didn't feel the urgency to necessarily hit the ground running. I wanted to focus on training, but I didn't want to ever be too comfortable or coddled, or I always wanted to grow. So I think that's why I was always very curious about different ways in which I could grow.
Yes. When did you meet this guy, Ryan J. Sloan?
Ryan and I have known each other since high school. It wasn't necessarily a performing arts high school. Oh. It was a tech school, but they had a really great performing arts program. And I was very involved in that program. But Ryan went to like a Catholic school, like an all-boys Catholic school. And we just connected on our love for the arts. We just got to nerd out. So
I get it. Yeah. Yeah. And you don't, sometimes you have friends, but they're not nerd out friends.
Yeah.
And it's kind of important to have that.
Yes. So we would just like totally nerd out on cinema, theater, music, And we just felt very connected. We liked a lot of the same things, and we had the same taste and had the same hunger and appetite for it. We just wanted to kind of consume everything. And when you find someone with that kind of energy and passion, you just link with them.
Yes. Before you guys actually went down the road of slowly building the Gazer premise and the characters, before this, were you developing and writing your own characters to play?
I felt like something that I was not very good at was writing, just in general. And when I had to kind of decide which route to take for college, I was kind of torn between pursuing a conservatory training or going to a liberal arts school. And I thought, well, since I'm in New York and I want to be in New York and I will be training outside of school, why not kind of broaden my friend group, my interests, just, be around different types of people and different types of worlds, because I think that's important just as a person. Yes. So the one thing I decided to do was study writing, and it wasn't film writing, it was journalism, because I was really terrible at it. Horrible writer. So I spent 4 years kind of becoming obsessed with journalism and journalistic writing and profile writing. Yeah. And through that, I got to meet a lot of, I get very obsessive with things. So once I declared that I was kind of taking a break from a sort of conservatory style training for acting, I went hard in the other direction with writing. I developed a magazine that ended up circulating like, I don't know, 1 million readers or something. Wow. It was called Naked Magazine. But I got to interview a lot of my favorite actors and musicians. So I was still learning.
Yeah. In a way, though, if you pull the lens back, right, you were interested in people. Yes. As a journalist, yes. Comes up so many times on this show, this journalistic instinct actors have. Yes. And it's so, isn't that interesting, right? Because even if you're just like, oh, this is a thing that I could pursue that's tangible, you're still thinking about your inner actor.
That's it.
Right?
That's really what it was. Yeah. But like you said, I love people. Yeah. And I loved, the thing about journalistic writing is it helped me learn how to ask questions about people. And I think that's so important for an actor. Absolutely. Having that curiosity. Yeah. And that dialogue. Yeah. And that really just, that fueled me a lot. And I learned a lot in that time.
That's huge. Yeah. And so there are people listening that have no connections to anything. They don't have a gig. They are artists. They're dying to share their art, either as an actor or as a writer, director. They have no money. They have a love for cinema. Yeah. And there were 2 people in the year 2020 sitting around watching stuff like Blow Up. And Blow Out and The Conversation, and they had no money. One is an actor and one is a filmmaker. Is this a weird way to get into this story? I don't know. No, it's. But this is you guys, you and Brian. I just want to relate it to what people who are listening, who are like, everybody's got this thing. It's like they want to find a reason why something succeeds. So they're like, oh, that's a Nepo baby, or that's a connected, or they're blank, and that's why they got that, or whatever. And and sometimes though, people just take on the burden of doing something on their own without anybody giving them any support. And they have to do it like you guys did, on weekends in the spring and fall
for 2 years.
Yeah.
You made Gazer on the weekends.
Yeah.
Saving money when you weren't doing it so you can do it again. Saving up all this money to do something like knowing that this bus needed to be rented, right? I'm talking, and saving up instead of sitting around waiting for some investor to give you thousands of dollars that they aren't going to give you because nobody is anybody, right? Because, you know, we know what world we live in right now.
Yeah.
You both just decided to take the reins and to do this on your own. So I want you to first take me back to like this decision. I've done this once, what I'm talking about here, on a lower scale. The only reason why I really pulled the trigger is because I was just so desperate to get something done.
Yeah.
Do you have to be desperate to do this? Do you have to be, do you know what I mean? Is that like what it was, or was it just you had a strong belief in yourselves?
I would say it's a desperate love, because I don't know, I can't think of any other place I'd rather put my money, you know? Yeah. And I can't think of any other place I'd rather put my time. So
wait, pause. That's huge, right? Everybody needs to ask themselves that. Like, if you would really rather get a car, or you'd really rather, you know, travel for 3 weeks somewhere and spend $10,000, right? Go do it.
Right. Yes.
Don't suffer with trying to get yourself to a place where you want to put money into your art. You know, don't waste the time. Just go do what you want. Life's too short.
Just do it, because I also always found that the process of asking for investment, or the process of asking for someone to believe in your project, you are relinquishing your power in a way. It's like you are asking someone else to have that belief in you, or like asking for permission to do something. And oftentimes, if you're approaching somebody who doesn't necessarily see what you see, because it's hard to see what's in your head. Right. You know, it's hard to ask somebody to be fully aligned with you. If you are putting yourself in that position where people are telling you whether or not it's worth it, why? Because you know that it's worth it, right? Because you love it. So I felt kind of uncomfortable with the idea of letting someone else tell me whether or not I can do something. Yes. So I'd rather just do it and show them.
Yes.
So really, I think the whole process was, there was no reason on paper for anyone to invest in this project.
Yeah.
Top to bottom, Ryan and I have no formal training.
Yeah.
We have not been a part of any sort of
Sundance lab.
Yeah.
Some other kind of fostering thing that would be some support.
Exactly.
That somebody could look and say, oh, okay, I may give you guys some money because somebody took a chance on you. No one took a chance on you.
No one took a chance. There was no one to vouch for us. No one to say, you know what, this is a good idea. You know?
Right.
Nothing. So my philosophy has always been, and my stepfather gave me this gift when I was writing. He said, if you want to write, then write. Don't wait for an invitation. He's like, what's stopping you?
Yes.
So the other side of that is, if no one's going to say yes, no one's also going to say no.
Right.
You can do it if you want.
Yes.
And if you have that, instead of asking others to have that belief in you, if you have that belief in you and you have that vision and you have, you know, the appetite and the discipline and the passion to do it, it's hard. Yeah. But like I said, I don't know where else I'd rather put my money and my time.
Right, that's it.
So it was hard, but it was also fun and necessary.
That's amazing. So an important part of this is that, specifically for what you guys actually ended up making, which is of course this movie called Gazer. We'll just keep saying it over and over again because we want people to go see this. The important one of the important aspect of this is that you're reading this book called The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat.
Yes.
At this time, which is Oliver Sacks. And you weren't reading that to try to be inspired by a certain mental condition that you wanted to give your character.
No.
But it just so happened that something in there was like, oh, this would be interesting to explore.
Yeah.
And what is this condition called again?
It's called dyschronometria.
Okay, wow, it's such a cool word, isn't it?
Yeah. And to this day, every time I say it,
Yeah.
like, am I saying it right?
Yeah.
I
Sounds
should
like it.
know.
It sounds right. And this is a time perception disorder.
Yes.
I'm curious where this was in terms of the process. Like, was this just an element that you were toying with, that you were talking to Ryan about, or were you starting to form this idea of this kind of movie that you guys wanted to make, and then this element came later?
Honestly, I have trouble remembering the genesis. At the time when we were, revisiting all the films that really excited us, things that we loved, we started with Chinatown. We went to Vertigo. We did all sorts of, the Double Indemnity. We did all the noirs, and then and then we went to Blow Up and Blowout in The Conversation. But I think it was while we were watching Vertigo. It was Vertigo and Blow Up and The Conversation that all share this structure called the spiral structure. And I think it was, I can't remember the order, because I was just reading separately this book at that time. I just picked it up randomly. I studied philosophy in school. That was it was a journalism and philosophy double major. So I ended up really being interested in mind-body theory. So I just picked it up because it was interesting. But I think if I remember correctly, I was reading it, and then when I saw Vertigo, I was like, oh, his vertigo is connected to the structure.
Yeah.
And I came across this condition that could be used in a similar way.
Interesting, yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
it was somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Where it was cooking.
And what was your working relationship with Ryan at the time? Were you guys just like coming at this as equal collaborators? Or were you just building your own character and kind of collaborating together on the story? Or is it all collaboration?
It was all collaboration.
That's beautiful. And I just want to point this out because, again, somebody's listening and they're a filmmaker and they're hanging out with somebody they love that's an actor, and they're both down and out. They have no chance of making it, right? But they know they're both talented and they love each other and they want to work together and they have a good friendship or whatever. You can just start to do something and build it.
Too, I've been thinking a lot about this. I think because we didn't expect the film to be embraced, because we didn't expect anyone to give us help, we had nothing but freedom. And I think you had mentioned before, when people are thinking about how do I get into this, or sometimes the question becomes, oh, what is working, or what does the market want? Or you start to adjust your creativity to fill a certain space. But I really think, like I said, Gazer down the line, there's nothing about the film that anyone would kind of sign on to make. They're a 70s style paranoia thriller with no stars.
Yeah.
That is somewhat a character study in the beginning that no one was asking for that. There was no space in the market for that. But I think the special thing is Ryan and I, from the beginning, were only concerned about making the film we wanted to see, that we were desperate to see. We were watching, The French Connection and like all of these films, especially in that era, where we were like, where are these films?
Yep.
We don't see these films anymore. And I wish I could go to the theater and buy a ticket to see this film.
Yeah.
So we were making it totally for us.
That was your
because
North Star.
That was our
Yeah.
North Star. We
Yeah.
weren't making it to, quote, make it or to
Right.
sell it or to make a career. We were
Yeah.
like, if we have nothing but time, what is the film that we want to see?
Yeah, yeah. Did you think it would take 2 years? Like, but this is an important question. I
Yeah.
think. Like, did you start out on that first weekend thinking this is going to take a while?
We have a friend. His name is Bruce Wimple. He is an extraordinary filmmaker because essentially what he does is he invests something like $20K into his own features that he somehow creates, like finishes top to bottom, writes, directs, does the cinematography, the coloring, edits, sound, Foley. He does everything in 2 weeks. He gets a bunch of friends together, and Ryan and I are part of that group of friends. We go up to the woods for 2 weeks and make a film. So we had done a couple of projects with him, and he works in such a, he works in that way that we also thought that Gazer, we were like, all right, we can.
You saw how it could be done. Yeah.
We saw how it could be done. We're
Yeah.
like, we could do this in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But we didn't have 20K.
Yeah.
So it ended up stretching to
Well, that's
2
interesting.
years.
Well, so you took the inspiration of
Yeah.
this and just didn't have the money, but you still had the inspiration.
Yeah.
And you had the freedom, and essentially you did have the time. It's just that the time took time.
Right. It just took time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about how you sustained this performance for so long, because if somebody didn't know it took this long, you would never know that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that your performance is so focused and so tight. Can you talk a little bit about what you had to do to kind of get back each weekend that you did? And of course, there's sometimes where there's probably weeks in between, or months sometimes, when you're going from a fall time to a springtime, when you have to get back into this again. What did you do to get back in?
This kind of goes back to the first question in a way. Like I said, I don't really ever approach a character the same way. And I knew because we were going to shoot over a period of time, it felt for this character important to develop her physical language and the arc of her physical language, because I knew that if I was running around on set and trying to order lunch or helping put up lights, or I knew I was going to be split. So I felt that one thing that worked for me was to anchor the performance by mapping physical shapes, if that makes sense. So even if I was mentally scattered, her physicality would ground me.
Interesting, yeah.
So that is, I think that was really helpful. So in the beginning of the film, Frankie is really living life as a ghost. She's a voyeur. She's trying so hard not to be seen, and her presence is so small. So her physicality in the beginning is this very kind of inward shape. I'm not really looking directly at people. And then as I become more active in the mystery, as I become more active in finding out what happened, her physical presence starts to also reflect that. So I kind of, in a way, mapped her physical journey to ground me on set.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then with Ryan, so we worked on that physical presence, and it also reflects in the voice too. In the beginning, I have a very softer voice. And then towards the end, as I'm coming into the motel, I have a straighter posture. I think I'm walking with a little more urgency. My voice has a little more depth to it. It's a little louder. I'm taking up more space. And I'm saying, I am here. I want to I'm really active in this
Yeah.
investigation. That was helpful. And then one thing that Ryan did that was so crucial for everybody, because it's not just me performance-wise is one thing, but for the film to not feel like it was shot over 2.5 years.
Yes.
Tonally, for the cinematography, for our whole crew to maintain that same energy is really hard.
Yeah.
So Ryan did a great job, because we would essentially all live together for those weekends. And before we would shoot, Steve Carter, our composer, he was kind of writing music to the script. So we already had like 15 tracks of the score before we shot. So before we would go in for our day of shooting, Ryan would start to play the score. So we would all kind of get into that noir mindset of the film.
Cool, yeah.
And then at the end of the day, we would rewatch the films that inspired Gazer. So we would have which is hilarious, because we would do a 8 to 10 hour shoot day and then watch Burning, which is like 2.5 hours. And everyone was so exhausted, but he would program, we would rewatch Blow Up and The Conversation and Burning and La Ventura, just to stay in that world.
That's really cool, though. Something sounds so right about that. Movies and music like really put you right in a certain mood, right?
Yeah, immediately.
Immediately.
That's something Anthony Abeson talked about. He says it is what Strasberg is not fully credited for, which is, he does a lot with the sensory, but he put a lot of emphasis on what music does, how immediately music can draw you into a space, and how it can add to the dynamic of how you feel yourself in the scene. It's just such an immediate tool.
Yes. The one thing that I am baffled by about what you guys did is also the one thing that I feel is your secret weapon. But again, I cannot figure out why you would do this to yourself. And that's shooting on film. And as much as I want this podcast right now, and especially when people go see this wonderful film, to be inspired because of the story you two have in the making of this, I feel like it's such a giant ball you were chaining to yourself to shoot on film. And yet at the same time, I know that it's one of the reasons why we're interested in this movie. And how you guys did this. It goes toward the story. They did it on film. They love film.
Yes.
They're celluloid lovers.
Yes.
My question to you is this, though. When he says, or maybe you both decided, we're going to do this without any money, but we're going to shoot on film. Were you right on board? That's my first part of the question. And then was there at any point during these 2 years where you thought, what the fuck did we do? Why did we decide this?
Never, actually. Kind of like what I was saying, just in terms of my training as an actor. Ryan and I, we're really students, we students who were not able to go to film school, who were not able to kind of be in these communities that we wanted to be in. So we really just wanted to take this time to learn. And Ryan has his own reasons for shooting on film. He just loves, he feels like film, and I can say this because I feel like I've heard him say it a couple of times, but he just feels like film is alive. It has such a life to it. But when I say, we're students, there's also the discipline of shooting on film that we were really interested in.
Yes.
It required us to be very prepared. We didn't have an infinite number of takes. We didn't have infinite resources.
Yes.
We had to, it kind of like made everyone felt that energy, where everyone was operating at 100. And everyone, I mean, you know, our 5 friends who were
Yeah.
on the crew.
Yeah.
But it fostered this environment of just like pure discipline and pure like, I guess you should have this regardless, but respect for every department, in that we had maybe 1 or 2 takes to get it done. And that's it. That's all we had. But we just really loved the discipline. And then I think too, narratively, like I said, Ryan just in general has always wanted to shoot on film. Frankie is forced to live this analog life in present day.
Right.
So I feel like that analog presence really captured
That's
that.
true. I didn't think of it like that, the connection to that in the story. That's so interesting like that. That's
But we also, we wanted to show people it can be done.
That's right.
If we were going to make this movie on our own because, you know, we wanted to, but if it was to be our calling card, we would want to say, by the way, we were able to do this, shoot it on film, and it didn't really make a difference in the budget.
That's amazing.
We wanted to show that it was possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. And was there ever a time, though, you as an actor were like, fuck, man, I would love one more take here?
Oh my God. Well, okay. So the very first shot, the very first thing we shot was the opening at the gas station. And I had to, with this character, I had to really split my producer brain from the acting brain, because the minute he yelled action, you can softly hear the film running through the gate.
Yeah.
And immediately I felt like, for half a second, I was like, oh my God, that's 50 cents, 85 cents, $1, $2. And then I had to say, shut up.
That is funny.
And focus on the scene.
That's funny.
So there was that first take where I was like, oh, I cannot be thinking about the film. Because I think each role is what, 9 minutes? It's technically 11, but you really have like 9.
Right.
Yeah, and I just saw the whole thing kind of flash before my eyes. I was like, I better nail this because we only have 9 minutes and it's, you know, $200.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had to quiet that.
I think there is something to it, though, right? When you know that you only have 1 or 2 takes, it really does up the game.
It does.
And
it's like
it's
theater.
Yeah, it's like theater. Yeah.
It was a great experience to do that. And I agree that it just totally, you just have to be on and you have to be prepared and you just have to do it. But that's not to say, I have director friends who also love doing the Fincher method of like 100 takes. As an actor, I'm open to that as well.
Yeah.
I think at some point you do get tired, but that's also part of that process where you get so tired that you stop thinking.
And you go into another place, yes.
You just do something else.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it really worked for us. And I think in terms of just doing other projects in the future, it gave us a real respect for budget. More than anything. We were burning our own money and burning our own time. So we know the value of $1.
Yes.
And we're not gonna, moving forward, I think for us, the discipline of knowing what it means to actually put in your own money.
Right.
If we do work with, you know, investors down the line, we have that ethos. We're not just gonna, we know what it means.
Yes. Yes.
We know the value of $1.
And that's huge. And that has to go a long way right now when hopefully people are taking note of what you did and are calling you into meetings. There has to be a point where they're thinking, well, these people know how to respect the budget and know how to respect time and can do it this way. So why wouldn't we take a chance on these folks with our own money?
There's something about doing it on your own and investing your own time and money and resources and knowing if we did something wrong, if we got something wrong or we didn't make our day or if anything went wrong, Ryan and I would have to spend 3 to 4 months working,
saving
3
up again.
jobs.
Yeah.
So tired to just do the same thing again.
Yeah.
But it really gives you that respect because just because someone's giving you money and they might have it doesn't mean that it's I don't know, that you shouldn't respect that investment in the same way. It's
Yeah.
not just there to burn, you know?
Yeah.
You have to be very, very disciplined.
Okay. You may have successfully taken off the producer hat in that first shot, right? To not hear the film moving. But there must have been other times when it had to come back on, and when it was on a little bit while you're acting in certain scenes and in certain tight situations. I keep hearing this story, you guys getting chased by cops or something like that. I mean, tell me at least something about the experience of trying to deliver this performance in conditions like this. It's not just about 1 or 2 takes happening, or the sun going down and worrying about like making the day, and where no one else is worrying. It's like you guys put the burdens on yourself with this, but you're also an actor trying to, the whole movie's on your shoulders.
Yeah.
So were there ever times when the worries that don't have to do with acting were interfering with the actual performance, and how did you handle that?
At times, for sure. But, and I don't know if this is just because I've trained with Brad, who we both have a sports background. I was a very competitive sports player for many, many years. And I know Brad shares this ethos. You leave it off the court, you know, at some point you just, even if the circumstances are not ideal, they rarely ever are ideal. So you can't spend too much time getting stressed about it. You just have to lock in. Not to say that you can't, I felt that way. There were times where I was like, okay, this is not, I don't feel like this is the best or the most ideal environment to deliver this performance. Like especially anything towards the end of the film where it's very high stakes, very emotionally demanding. A lot of those were like very cold nights, very quick, 1 or 2 takes, not ideal. But I always thought like, okay, well, if I ever get the privilege of being on, a set like Dune, you kind of just have to show up and do it.
Yeah.
You just, everyone is operating at 1,000, and you should, be gentle with yourself and not put too much pressure. But I think it really just comes to preparation. Like if you just spend all your time preparing, you can kind of bypass those moments of, you could freak out, but you can trust. I think it's just, this is what I'm trying to get at. Trust. You trust the team. I trusted Ryan. I trusted our cinematographer, Matt Bastos. I trusted our entire team. And if they said, even if I felt like I needed one more, or I wanted to do one more, or it wasn't great, there were a lot of times throughout the filming where I was like, it could be better. But if the team, I don't know, you just have to trust the team.
Trust,
and you have to just let it go.
Yeah.
It could always be better. You can work on something for 50 years and not crack it.
That's right. Also, you could do 50 takes and still walk away thinking the same thing, or thinking that first take was the best.
Exactly. You never know. So at some point, you just have to let it go.
Yeah.
So I think throughout Gazer, it was the process of also letting it go. And I think for me too, this was one of my first times really being beholden to marks. That was a learning curve for me. We had very specific marks. And that was my first experience with that. And I was very frustrated in the beginning, but we did a number of rehearsals before going in for a take that I had to, I started to think of it like dancing.
You're shaking me in my boots, because I'm just thinking like, man, hitting marks precisely, knowing that there's maybe not another take.
Yes. That's what there was so much
bad
pressure.
Enough both of those are happening at the same time. I can imagine.
Oh, my pressure was through the roof.
Yeah.
It was, but with marks, I try to find, every time I start to feel stressed about something, I try to find a way of looking at it that makes me feel less stressed. So marks in particular, I thought of dancing. And when you're dancing, You're hitting very specific choreography
Yeah.
at specific marks.
Yeah.
But it's not hitting the marks and hitting the moves. It's the expression of hitting those marks and hitting
Oh,
those moves.
interesting. Yeah.
So instead of feeling kind of restricted by the mark, I thought of it like dancing, where it's how you hit the mark.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like
so
how
cool.
you
That's an interesting
express
way.
it.
Yeah. In the very least, what that did is just take the pressure off in a way, right?
It made it more fun.
And made it fun.
Yeah, because you can tell someone to do a high kick, but the difference between someone doing a high kick and then a dancer doing a high kick,
Yeah.
the kick is the same, the mark is the same,
Yeah.
their restrictions are the same, but the expression of the kick is different.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think it just made it more fun.
That's so cool. And it reminds me of, this is somewhat related, but it might be helpful to people. I heard once at a memorial service, it was a teacher, a singing teacher. The student said, I'm just scared of this. I can't hit this. I'm scared of it. And the teacher said, why don't you do it like the person who isn't scared would do it?
Yes. And I'm
it's-
sure they hit it.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, how
Yeah.
freeing is that? I mean, then we
Yep.
can. You were doing it like a dancer would, who is free in their movement and like,
Right.
right? And it's just like
But they
stepping
love the
in.
mark.
Yeah, they
The
love.
dancer loves the mark.
Yeah.
So I was like, how can I love this mark? How is it
Yes.
not a restriction, but it's actually my friend?
Yes.
So when you hit it, it's like you hit it with energy.
And when you guys finally got done and realized that that was the last shot of this long process, because you were so prepared, right? It's not like you didn't know if you got everything. You knew exactly what you had
Yeah.
and what you needed to get. And you knew when you were done, and you knew that this was the last weekend, and here it is, it's done. Do you guys go into the editing together?
So Ryan, throughout the process, and I just want to give a shout out to Color Lab. So although we had pretty much no support, either financially or institutionally, or however you would call it, Airy Rental knew what we were doing, and they were so collaborative with us, and they were so supportive of what we were doing. We felt very supported by them. And then Color Lab as well. There were times where we would send them the film, but we didn't have the money yet to necessarily process it.
Get
so they
it
would
out of the lab. The
hold
money
it.
to get it.
Yeah. And we were very grateful for that. Anyway, that's all to say, throughout the process, when we would get the film back, Ryan started to kind of place it in the timeline.
Right. That makes sense, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, right, 2.5 years, he would
Right.
start placing it. And then he alone did the initial full pass.
Mm-hmm.
And then we brought on our friend, Jordan Toussaint, who helped us with the edit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think our initial first edit of the film was 2 hours and 10 minutes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew something was wrong, but we were so deep in the woods. We just could not.
Yeah.
We could not figure out. We felt like something was, could be different, but we were so kind of like stuck to the narrative at that point. And this is, again, for people who are not, who are listening and who don't know anybody, the value of just reaching out with passion, with respect and reverence. We had always loved the work of Yorgos Mavrosidis, who is Yorgos Lanthimos' collaborator and editor, but pretty much throughout his entire career. We've always loved the way his films feel rhythmically. And we reached out to Yorgos before we started shooting. We had worked with him on just a short film project. But we just sent him a note. We were like, we love you. We love your work. If you are inspired by this, what we've written, we would love to collaborate with you, if not for this or down the line. So we'd kept in touch, and we sent him our film, and we said, Yorgos, we don't have any budget. We can't expect you to work on this formally. Would you be willing to watch what we've done and just give us your first impressions? And he came back to us with notes that completely changed the shape of the film.
Oh, cool.
And the main note that he gave us was, you could be more daring with the edit. And even just that, for a master like him.
Yeah. Like permission, right? Almost.
Yes. He said you could be more daring. Well, and that's why it's important to open it up to feedback and collaborators, and surround yourself with people who you trust. Surround yourself with people who challenge you. If we were so protective of our vision, Gazer would not be. Gazer is not just, truly not the vision of Ryan and Ariella. It is, I mean, Matt's cinematography, I think, is as important as the writing. Like, Steve's score is as important as, everything is working together. But if you removed one thing, it would not be the same film. Which is what I love so much about filmmaking.
Yes.
It's a team.
Yes.
And it can't just be a singular vision.
Yes.
Oh, you're working towards, you have to make the same film.
Yeah.
But it's
right.
a collaborative.
And that's why it's you're either going to learn that sooner or later. You know what I mean? And I think some people maybe learn that on their deathbed, and it's a weird way to say it, but you know what I mean? I just mean like where they're like, oh fuck, I should have been more collaborative, because I could have gotten more out of this medium and out of this art. Because that's what it is. That's what it's special about it. It's different from the other arts because of this. And when you know that early on, that's huge. Like, that's going to serve you both and all of you. I mean, I really believe that. Here I am talking to you. I'm so excited about this movie. I want to inspire people. I love the story of the making of this. This is what I want. I want things to be picked up that were made like this. So on and on and on and on and on. Yeah. Perfect, right? But you just reminded me that you and I met 2 years ago, kind of working at a screening of something. And that, I'm realizing that was when you were making this movie.
Yeah.
And if you had said to me, I'm making a movie on the weekends, on film, I would have said, you're out of your fucking mind.
And I would have said, you're right.
I mean, or worse, I would have said, please stop.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah. There has to be some other. I'm saying this, I think it's important to say, because you're going to meet people that, after you proved that you can do it, are going to tell you that this is the story they love, and they love this about independent. They're so happy for you. But if you met them in the middle of the fucking storm, and I'm admitting that this indie film guy who would light fire to the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion would be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm such a indie person who loves the story, but I am not a believer when it's in the middle. Even me, I'm saying. And what do you have to say to people that are listening that might be in the middle of the struggle and nobody cares?
Don't wait for permission, because it's hard to convince people of what you're doing while you're doing it. I fully believe there are people who can do that. That's a whole separate skill set. I don't know how those people are able to convince anyone to get on board with their vision. I just always felt like, don't let someone either confirm or deny what you're going to do with your time. I think everyone's really tired and really jaded and somewhat feeling kind of hopeless. The landscape has changed so much. It's so hard to get things made. It's so hard to get things financed. It's so hard to get things distributed. But it's hard for those companies. It's hard for the distributors to make money. It's hard for productions to even get greenlit. Everything is hard. Something needs to change. We all need to come together and support this idea that something needs to change.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would just say, do as much as you can on your own, because that's all you have control of. And then hopefully we'll continue. Ryan, knows more about this historically, but he says when you have all the major film movements, when you have New Hollywood, when you have mumblecore, when you have any sort of dogma, any sort of film movement that's happened, it only shifted the landscape because people came together to do it. So we have to embrace each other, and we have to, I'm hoping that anything that comes out of Gazer for us, if we can, if we have the opportunity to make the next film, if we have the opportunity to make any sort of changes, we want to lift people up. Like, it's constantly, kind of climbing and then pulling people up with you, and then getting everyone together at the top to change.
Yes.
Because we all love this,
Yes.
And it is not to get kind of cheesy either. Like, yes, it all comes from passion, but we all do need to make a living. And I think, I don't know, the audience is a part of that community. It's hard to see a movie for $20.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Film, if I'm correct, going to see movies was a response to not being able to afford theater. And theater was at the, when it, whatever, back in the day, that was a response, that was for the people who had no money.
Yeah.
All, like, we can't, it's for the people. So everything right now is so inflated and it's so impossible. But we all still want it to survive. So we have to figure out a way to continue making it survive. But I think we are unkind to audiences.
Yes. And like you're saying, we have to do it together.
Yes.
You and Ryan have other projects that you're planning, that you're writing. It's almost like a trilogy that you'd like to do.
Yes.
If I'm correct. And hopefully you won't have to save money to make these movies now. But is there anything in the scenario of that I am manifesting where you guys have a little bit more leeway in terms of money, a little more leeway in terms of time, a little more leeway in terms of production in general? But is there anything that you wouldn't change from how you guys made this? Do you know what I mean? That even if your ship comes in now, which I am manifesting,
I appreciate that.
That you actually are like, no, we liked this part of this. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, 100%. There are so many things that we want to continue doing. Obviously, we've only made Gazer the way we made Gazer. So I think there are certain parameters in terms of unions and, there are technical requirements that add to costs that I don't even know where to navigate. And I think a lot of the kind of independent budget range, there's a lot, it seems like there's a lot of tension because it's hard to make a film for not a lot of money under those parameters, but it's like those parameters exist to protect people. So, like I said, that's a whole different kind of landscape. I think ideally what we've learned from Gazer that I would like to continue to do is really make sure that the budget, whatever budget comes in, ends up on the screen. And try to keep things small as we can. But I think what we learned in terms of discipline, the preparation, the rehearsals, the being specific about the takes and the shots, that is something that's always going to be in our control. I think regardless of budget. But yeah, I really think that the discipline of the preparation rehearsal, we're going to continue. I also think that I don't ever want to be in a circumstance where I feel like I'm necessarily making something, I want to say, like, for the wrong reasons, or like to satisfy something else. Like, at the end of the day, we really made this film for audiences. Like I said, like we made it for us, for our people, because it was a film that we just really craved that wasn't being made. And I hope that we continue to have that kind of, even if someone's not going to give us permission to have that artistic freedom, I think no matter what, we're going to continue to make the movies we want to see. But yeah, that's all I can hope for the next film, is to stay humble, respectful, to prepare as much as possible, and to really always feel like it is our money and our time, and to just make sure everyone is happy and, doing it because they love to do it.
Ariella Mastroianni, thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.